All right, jumping right into it. Today's deep dive is all about patellar tendonitis.
Oh, good one.
You know, that jumper's knee. You've given us a ton of great material to work with.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to unpack all this and really get into the nitty-gritty.
Yeah, it'll be fun.
Knowing you, you're probably pretty active,
Always.
maybe even in a high-impact stuff, or perhaps, someone's struggling with this stubborn jumper's knee.
Yes, and what's interesting is that while most people think of patellar tendonitis as this sudden acute injury,
Right.
it often develops gradually over time.
Okay, so maybe before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's do a quick level set.
Yeah, good idea.
So we're talking about that tendon connecting the kneecap to the shin bone, right?
Right, it's this thick, fibrous cord that plays a crucial role in extending your leg.
Right.
Now, every time you jump, run, or even just land from a jump, this tendon absorbs a tremendous amount of force.
Right.
And if we push too hard, too often, without giving it adequate time to recover, that's when we start seeing problems.
You mentioned those tiny micro tears. I imagine that's where the trouble really starts brewing.
Exactly. These micro tears are basically tiny tears in the tendon fibers.
Okay.
Think of it like fraying a rope.
Right.
A few strands here and there, no big deal.
Yeah.
But if the fraying continues, eventually that rope's going to weaken and potentially snap.
So our body tries to repair those micro tears,
Uh-huh.
but if we don't give it a break, the inflammation becomes chronic.
Exactly. And it's not just about the amount of activity, it's also about the intensity. If you're used to running 5 miles and suddenly jump to 10, you're significantly increasing the load on that tendon.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So those micro tears lead to pain and tenderness just below the kneecap. That's kind of the hallmark symptom,
That's
right?
the most common symptom, yes.
Okay.
But you might also experience stiffness in the knee,
Hmm.
difficulty fully extending or bending your leg.
Right.
And that pain might even radiate up towards the thigh or down towards the shin.
So it sounds like patellar tendonitis can really put a damper on your active lifestyle.
Yeah,
But are there any early warning signs we should be looking out for?
absolutely.
Okay.
If you start noticing any pain or discomfort during or after activity, especially when going downstairs or squatting,
Okay.
that's your body's way of saying, hey, something's not right.
Okay, so we've talked about how those micro tears develop and the common symptoms,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm really curious about who's most at risk for developing patellar tendonitis in the first place.
Right.
I've heard that certain athletes are more prone to it.
Yes. Certain sports that involve a lot of jumping and repetitive stress on the knees, like
Okay.
basketball, volleyball, and track and field, tend to have higher rates of patellar tendonitis.
Right.
But it's not just limited to athletes.
Right.
Anyone who regularly engages in activities that put a lot of strain on that patellar tendon can be at risk.
So what are some of the factors that might make someone more susceptible?
Sure.
You mentioned increasing mileage too quickly for runners. Are there other things like that?
Absolutely. Muscle imbalances are a big one.
Okay.
If certain muscle groups are weak, like the quads, glutes, or even your core,
Mm-hmm.
it puts extra strain on the knee joint and that patellar tendon.
Right.
It's like having a wobbly table leg. The other legs have to work harder to compensate, and eventually they might buckle under the pressure.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I've never thought about it like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just about strengthening the muscles around the knee,
Right.
but making sure there's overall balance.
Precisely.
Okay.
Another factor is flexibility, particularly in the hamstrings and calves.
Okay.
If these muscles are tight, they can pull on the kneecap, increasing tension on the patellar tendon and making it more susceptible to injury.
It's all starting to connect now.
Yeah.
Tight hamstrings pulling on the kneecap, weak quads not providing enough support.
Uh-huh.
It's like a chain reaction
Yeah.
leading to that poor tendon getting overloaded.
I got it.
Yeah.
And we can't forget about factors like improper training techniques,
Right.
using incorrect footwear, or even biomechanical issues like flat feet or overpronation,
Okay.
where your foot rolls inward excessively.
Mhm.
All of these things can alter your movement patterns and increase stress on the knee.
Okay, so it seems like there's a whole web of factors that can contribute to patellar tendonitis.
Yeah.
But before we get too overwhelmed, let's shift gears and talk about what we can do to prevent this from happening in the first place.
Right. It might seem like a lot, but the good news is that we have a good deal of control over many of these factors.
Okay.
Let's start with those muscle imbalances we talked about.
Okay, so what kind of exercises can help us build that strong and balanced support system for our knees?
When it comes to strengthening those all-important knee-supporting muscles,
Right.
2 exercises really stand out.
Okay.
Wall sits and hip bridges.
Okay.
Wall sits are fantastic for targeting the quadriceps.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine sliding down a wall until you're in a seated position, knees bent at a 90-degree angle.
Right.
Holding that position, even for a short time, can really fire up those quads.
Ah, I've done those before.
Oh, yeah.
They look deceptively simple,
Mm-hmm.
but wow, do they work.
They do.
What about hip bridges?
Yeah.
Those seem to be all the rage these days.
Hip bridges are excellent for strengthening the glutes,
Okay.
those powerhouse muscles that play a crucial role in hip extension and stability.
Mm-hmm.
And when the glutes are strong,
Right.
it takes a lot of pressure off the knees.
Okay, so wall sits for the quads, hip bridges for the glutes,
Mm-hmm.
both working together to create a solid foundation.
Yeah,
What about flexibility?
sure.
We were talking about tight hamstrings and calves
Mm.
potentially contributing to patellar tendonitis.
Right, flexibility is key, especially in those muscle groups.
Okay.
Think of it this way.
Mhm.
When those muscles are tight,
Right.
they're constantly pulling on the kneecap,
Yeah.
putting extra stress on the patellar tendon.
Mm-hmm.
Regular stretching can help lengthen those muscles.
Okay. Relieving that tension and allowing for smoother, more efficient movement.
So what are some effective stretches for the hamstrings and calves?
Okay.
I'm always looking for new ones to add to my routine.
For hamstrings, a classic standing forward fold is a good one.
Okay.
Just bend at the hips, keeping your back straight,
Right.
and reach towards your toes.
Mm-hmm.
You should feel a gentle stretch in the back of your legs.
Yeah.
For calves, a standing calf stretch against a wall or step is effective.
Okay.
Lean forward with one leg straight behind you,
Mm-hmm.
pressing your heel into the ground until you feel a stretch in your calf.
Those are good ones.
Yeah.
And I imagine it's important to make stretching a regular habit, not just something we do when we're already feeling tight.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Think of it like brushing your teeth for your muscles.
Right.
A few minutes each day can make a big difference in the long run.
Okay.
Now, beyond strengthening and stretching, let's talk about training techniques.
Okay, you're about to drop some serious training wisdom. I can feel it. Oh, I don't know about that. But
What should we be mindful of to protect those knees?
one of the most important things,
Okay.
and something that's often overlooked, is warming up properly before any activity.
Right.
A good dynamic warm-up prepares your muscles for the work ahead, increasing blood flow,
Yeah.
improving flexibility, and literally warming up the tissues.
I'm picturing those old school static stretches people used to do.
Uh-huh.
Just standing there and holding a hamstring stretch for 30 seconds.
Right.
Is that what we're talking about?
Not exactly.
Right.
While static stretching has its place,
Mm-hmm.
for a warm-up, we want to focus on dynamic movements that mimic the activity we're about to do.
Gotcha.
Think leg swings,
Okay.
arm circles, torso twists, lunges, light squats,
Yeah.
things that get your body moving through a full range of motion.
Okay, so dynamic warm-ups are in, static stretches are out,
Mm-hmm.
at least for pre-workout.
Yeah.
What else should we keep in mind?
Proper form is crucial. Whether you're running, lifting weights, or even just walking,
Right.
maintaining good posture and alignment ensures that forces are distributed evenly throughout your body,
Yep.
reducing stress on specific joints like the knees.
It's like building a house with a strong foundation, right?
Exactly.
If the alignment is off, the whole structure is more likely to have problems.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of foundations,
Okay.
let's not forget about footwear.
Right.
Supportive shoes that fit well and provide adequate cushioning can make a world of difference. If you have flat feet or other biomechanical issues,
Yeah.
orthotics might be helpful in correcting those imbalances and reducing strain on the knees.
So many good points. I feel like I'm taking notes over here.
Huh.
So let's say someone is already dealing with patellar tendonitis.
Okay.
We've laid out a great foundation for prevention, but what about recovery?
Right.
Where do they start?
Recovering from patellar tendonitis requires a multifaceted approach. And it often starts with those tried and true principles of rest, ice, compression, and elevation. The Rice method.
The classic Rice method. I remember my mom using that for everything when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But is rest really the best strategy? Don't we want to keep moving to some degree?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And the answer isn't always a straightforward yes or no.
Right.
It's more nuanced than that.
Okay.
While rest is crucial in the initial stages to allow that inflammation to subside,
Okay.
complete inactivity can actually be detrimental.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between rest and movement.
Right.
What does that active recovery look like in practice?
Active recovery might involve gentle range of motion exercises,
Okay.
like slowly bending and straightening your knee or doing some light walking.
Right.
The key is to listen to your body and avoid anything that causes sharp pain.
So we're managing the inflammation with rice and incorporating some gentle movement to prevent stiffness. What comes next in the recovery process?
Once the initial inflammation is calmed down, we can start incorporating specific exercises to strengthen the muscles around the knee and promote tendon healing. Two types of exercises are particularly beneficial for patellar tendonitis.
Okay.
Eccentric exercises and isometric exercises.
Eccentric versus isometric.
Yeah.
I've heard those terms thrown around before. But honestly, I get them mixed up.
Okay.
Can you break them down for me?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Eccentric exercises involve slowly lengthening a muscle under tension. It's like the down phase of a bicep curl or the lowering phase of a squat. This type of movement is particularly effective for stimulating tendon repair.
Okay.
And building strength in that specific range of motion where the tendon is often stressed.
So it's not just about lifting the weight.
Right.
But controlling the lowering phase.
Exactly.
Okay, what are some good examples of eccentric exercises for patellar tendonitis?
Two classic examples are decline squats and eccentric step downs.
Okay.
For decline squats, you'd stand on a slightly sloped surface and slowly lower yourself down, emphasizing that eccentric phase of the movement.
Right.
And for eccentric step downs, you'd stand on a step and slowly lower your heel towards the ground.
Right.
Both of these exercises really target the patellar tendon.
Got it.
Yeah.
So controlled lowering, really focusing on that eccentric movement. What about isometric exercises?
Okay.
You mentioned they're good for pain management. How so?
Isometric exercises involve holding a static position.
Okay.
So there's no movement at the joint.
Right.
This is great for building strength without putting excessive stress on the tendon, making them ideal for those painful early stages of recovery.
So it's all about that controlled hold. What are some good examples of isometric exercises for patellar tendonitis?
We already mentioned wall sits.
Right.
And those can also be used isometrically. Just hold that squat position against the wall for a set amount of time, focusing on engaging those quads. Straight leg raises are another good one.
Okay.
Lie on your back with one leg straight and slowly lift it a few inches off the ground.
Right.
Holding it for a few seconds before lowering.
Okay, so eccentric exercises for tendon repair and strength building.
Yeah.
Isometric exercises for pain management. It sounds like there's a real strategy here, not just randomly picking exercises.
Exactly. And as you start to feel better, you can gradually progress these exercises, either by adding more weight, reps, or sets, or by progressing to more challenging variations. This gradual increase in demand helps the tendon adapt and become more resilient over time.
It's like leveling up in a video game.
Yeah, there you go.
But what about plyometrics? Those explosive jumping type exercises? Where do those fit into the recovery picture?
Plyometrics, like box jumps and skater hops, come later in the rehab process when you've regained a good amount of strength and control.
Okay.
They're great for restoring that athletic explosiveness and training your tendons to handle high-impact forces.
So plyometrics are like the victory lap, a sign that you're well on your way to recovery.
Yeah. Okay.
But even when you're feeling good, I imagine it's still important to maintain those strengthening and flexibility routines we talked about earlier.
Absolutely. Those are key for long-term prevention and keeping those knees happy.
Right.
Now, before we move on to busting some common myths, I know you had some listener questions based on the source material.
Right. Let's tackle those before we wrap up this part.
Sounds good.
First up, how long does it typically take to recover from patellar tendonitis?
Okay.
I bet that's a question on a lot of people's minds.
That's a common question, and unfortunately, there's no easy answer.
Right.
Recovery time for patellar tendonitis really depends on a whole bunch of factors. How severe the tendon damage is, how quickly you address it, how closely you stick to your rehab plan, your overall health, and even things like age and genetics play a role.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
Right.
Some people might bounce back in a few weeks, while others might take months.
Exactly. Right. And that's why it's so important to be patient and consistent with your rehab.
Right.
Don't rush the process. Focus on long-term healing, not just quick fixes.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Patience is key. Next question. What are some good low-impact activities I can do while I'm recovering?
Okay.
I imagine staying active is important, but we want to avoid anything that aggravates the tendon.
Right. We want to keep moving without putting excessive stress on that knee. Swimming is fantastic because it's non-weight bearing
Right.
and provides a great cardio workout.
Yeah.
Cycling is another good option, whether it's outdoors or on a stationary bike. And elliptical machines can give you a good cardio workout without the impact of running.
Those are all great suggestions.
Yeah.
It's good to know there are still ways to stay active and have fun while you're recovering.
Definitely.
All right, last question. Can patellar tendonitis be permanently fixed? Or is it something that will always come back?
Okay.
I have a feeling this is a question that weighs heavily on a lot of people's minds.
It's a valid concern.
Yeah.
While it's true that once you've had patellar tendonitis, you're slightly more prone to recurrence.
Okay.
Especially if you don't make any changes to your training habits or address any underlying biomechanical issues.
Right.
It doesn't have to be a life sentence.
Oh, okay.
Consistent strength training, flexibility work, and maintaining good biomechanics can significantly reduce your risk.
So knowledge is power.
It is.
By understanding this condition, we can take control of our knee health.
Yeah.
But I know there are also a lot of myths and misconceptions floating around about patellar tendonitis.
Definitely.
Should we tackle some of those before we wrap up?
Absolutely. Let's bust some myths.
Okay. Myth number 1. Complete rest is the best way to heal patellar tendonitis.
Okay.
We've already touched on this a bit.
Yeah.
But it's worth unpacking further.
Yes, this is a big one. While rest is important in the initial stages to allow that inflammation to subside,
Right.
complete inactivity can actually be detrimental.
Yeah.
It can lead to muscle weakness, stiffness, and slower healing.
Okay.
Remember, we want to promote blood flow and keep those tissues moving to facilitate repair.
So it's not about lying on the couch for weeks on end.
Right.
Active recovery is key. What about myth number 2? You should just push through the pain.
Okay.
I feel like this is a dangerous one,
It is.
especially in our no pain, no gain culture.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Pain is our body's way of telling us something is wrong.
Right.
While some mild discomfort during exercise is normal, sharp or persistent pain is a big red flag.
Yeah.
Pushing through that kind of pain can worsen the injury and delay healing.
Let's listen to your body. Pain is not a badge of honor.
No.
It's a signal to back off and reassess.
Exactly.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've explored the causes of patellar tendonitis, dove deep into the symptoms and risk factors, laid out a solid plan for prevention,
Yeah.
and even navigated the road to recovery, all while busting some pesky myths along the way.
It's been fun.
Yes, and we answered some great listener questions, which I always love.
Me too.
They really helped us round out this deep dive. We hope you feel empowered with the knowledge to take care of your knees and keep moving.
Yeah, keep moving.
And remember, if you're experiencing persistent pain, don't hesitate to seek professional evaluation from a physical therapist or doctor. They can help you get on the right track to recovery.
Exactly. There's no shame in seeking help.
Right.
It's a sign of strength, not weakness.
Now, before we go, one final thought-provoking question to leave you with. Knowing all that we've discussed today, what's one change you can make today to protect your knees and keep doing the activities you love?
We'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yes. Feel free to continue exploring this topic. Share your experiences and connect with other folks who are on this journey.
Yeah.
Until next time, keep moving and stay curious.
Take care.